Well, it's the third in the theme of the giving theme, as is our year of spiritual practice. And people have shared with me that the last two Sunday talks that I've given were different talks than they expected from the titles. And so I think, well, that's interesting. I kind of threw people a little curve. And so I like it when that happens. And it's intentional to some degree, and today's talk is no different. I have three stories that I want to share with you to illustrate the point for today's talk. Have you ever heard of a Saint Maximilian Kolbe? Maybe some of you have. Yes, you know who that is. He was a Polish Franciscan friar who volunteered to die in place of a stranger in a Nazi concentration camp in Auschwitz in Poland. In July 1941, a man from Kolbe's barracks had vanished, prompting the camp commander to pick 10 men from the same barracks to be starved to death in Block 11. It's notorious for its torture if you've read any of the Second World War history. And in order to deter further escape attempts, the man who disappeared, of course, was found later drowned in a camp latrine. But one of the selected men cried out, lamenting his family, and Kolbe volunteered to take his place. During the time in the cell awaiting their imminent demise, he led the men in songs and prayer. And it was interesting that after 3 weeks of dehydration and starvation, only Kolbe was the one who was left alive. And he was executed then with an injection because he just had this stoic kind of countenance about him. He's one of 10 20th century martyrs from across the world who are depicted in statues above the Great West Door of Westminster Abbey in London. If you've ever been there, you would see him. He was canonized by Pope John Paul on October 10th, 1982, in the presence of the man whose life he saved. So interesting. So this talk title today is interesting because of the word should in the talk title. How much should I give? The title could be very different if it read, how much can I give? How much do I give? How much will I give? Or how much would I give? Given similar circumstances to St. Maximilian, would I give my own life for someone else's? That's a big question. And oftentimes on certain psychological tests, they will ask the student to choose who should die. If you could only save one person and you had to choose between your child, your sibling, or one of your parents, who would you choose? If you had to choose even your own life, to give your own life over theirs. Apparently in psychology, there's some greater meaning to the one we choose to save, and the reasoning behind it is very telling. It's sort of a moral question as much as anything else. And when we put ourselves in the mix of who to choose, things do get very interesting. Every day, Ernest Holmes tells us that it's an opportunity to save ourselves. As St. Paul said in the Bible, I die daily. I die daily to the old me and resurrect a new me and move into my life from a totally different perspective. You know, we change our minds on a regular basis over things that we thought we'd never change our minds about, right? We get a different perspective on a certain issue in life, and all of a sudden we find ourselves thinking a little bit differently. When I discovered the science of mind, I discovered the relationship with God that I knew as a youngster, a little person. And it wasn't a sin to believe in this new way either, contrary to what Father Guinan told me in catechism. As a 10 to 13-year-old, I was constantly in trouble for asking questions that the priests and nuns didn't want me to ask. Maybe they couldn't answer them. That was the problem. That maybe some of those questions that are so in-depth that little children ask, why all the time, and sometimes we just say, oh, just because I said so. I think that was largely the way it ended up being with Father Guinan as well. The second story that I want to tell you is, again, one person's giving consciousness and how it changed an entire ecological system. A little more than 30 years ago, a teenager named Jadav Molai Payeng, began burying seeds in a barren sandbar near his birthplace in northern India's Assam region to grow a refuge for wildlife. Not long after, he decided to dedicate his life to this endeavor. So he moved to the site so he could work full-time, creating a lush new forest ecosystem. Incredibly, the spot today hosts a sprawling 1,360 acres of jungle that Payeng planted single-handedly. The Times of India recently caught up with him in his remote forest lodge to learn more about how he came to leave such an indelible mark on this landscape. It all started way back in 1979 when the floods washed a large number of snakes ashore on a sandbar. And one day after the waters had receded, Payeng, only 16 years old at the time, found a place dotted with these dead reptiles. That was the turning point in his life. The snakes died in the heat without any tree cover. I sat down, he said, and wept over their lifeless forms. It was carnage. I alerted the forest department and asked them if they would grow trees there. They said nothing would grow there. Instead, they asked me to try growing bamboo. And you all know the story about bamboo and how long it takes to grow. It was painful, but I did it. There was nobody to help me. Nobody was interested. While it's taken years for his remarkable dedication to planting some well-deserved recognition, to receive some well-deserved recognition internationally, it didn't take long for the wildlife in the region to benefit from the manufactured forest. Demonstrating a keen understanding of ecological balance, Payeng even transplanted ants to his burgeoning ecosystem to bolster its natural harmony. I'll never think about ants in the same way when they show up in my kitchen anymore. I think about this fellow. And soon the shadeless sandbar was transformed into a self-functioning environment where a menagerie of creatures could dwell. The forest is now called Molai Woods in his honor, and it now serves as a safe haven for numerous birds, deer, rhinos, tigers, and elephants, species increasingly at risk from habitat loss. And despite the conspicuousness of his project, forestry officials in the region first learned of the new forest in only 2008. And since then, they've come to recognize his efforts as truly remarkable. But perhaps, they said, not enough. He's been doing this for over 30 years, and had he been in any other country, he probably would have been made a hero. We do not live by ourselves. I think that that's the bigger message of these two first stories. We are all individual parts of humanity. And whether or not we realize it, we are influencing those around us in a significant way. And each of us in turn is being influenced by others. And we really don't know what we say and what we do and how it influences children particularly, because they're like little sponges. They pick up everything. And the thoughts and opinions and actions of the whole world finally are based on what everyone thinks and believes. Do I believe that as one person, I can make a difference in my world? Yes, I do. And as my friend Aman Motwani said so beautifully in his book, Yes, You Can Change the World, one person at a time finds 9 other people to affect the same change, and the world is changed accordingly. It becomes exponential. I watched with great interest the contagion of happy people who participated on Thursday night in our prayer meeting. No, they weren't just hyped up on ice cream, because they were happy before the ice cream. But the ice cream helped. I got to say, the ice cream helped. There was genuine joy, and the spirit of each person permeated this whole entire room. The God essence was so much in evidence, and each person felt safe in sharing their wisdom, asking questions, and giving opinions without restraint. Ernest explains it this way. He said, I'm sure you have had the experience of finding yourself more or less frustrated and confused and beginning to wonder what life is about. Then you have the privilege of sitting down quietly with someone or a whole bunch of someones whose atmosphere is permeated with peace and confidence. And gradually you have felt the rough edges of your agitation disappear. until finally your own atmosphere changes and you are filled with hope and confidence. This is a wonderful example of how spiritual reaction can work. It reaches out to all around us and sets in motion a clean reaction to where there is really no limit. I watched that on Thursday night with great interest, because I didn't see anyone here being annoyed or upset. I didn't see anyone saying that it should be different than it is. I just saw people giving ideas and sharing the wealth of knowledge that was in the room. And I would have loved for everyone in the congregation to be able to participate. But as I said, you can go downstairs in the breezeway and just get a look at what our wonderful Chris Short has drawn for us as an idea, I think, whose time has come. And the last story I want to share has to do also with Robin Williams. And as you know, as everyone knows, how could you not know that he did make his transition this week? And it's interesting, we have a church member, Sandy and Greg Kinseth. They're not here today, but Greg came to see me on Thursday. And it was fascinating to me because as long as I've known Greg, which has only been about 4 or 5 months, every time I saw him, I thought I knew him from somewhere. And I would always look at him and strangely and think, wow, he's so familiar to me. And after the onslaught of pictures of Robin Williams from every possible direction last week, I realized Greg Kinseth looks just like Robin Williams. And so it was kind of one of those funny things, because he said he gets recognized all over the place. And he very often just says to people, thank you, when they tell him what a wonderful actor or comedian he is, because he gets so tired of trying to explain, I'm really not Robin Williams. Anyway, my friend Dr. Jim Lockhart said at lunch last week that all the opinions and ideas and thoughts around the death of such a public person are only reflections of our own uncertainty. And that's what we have to look at. This was written by Peter Coyote, a fellow actor and friend of Robin Williams, and he called it Robin's Last Gift. And this is what he wrote, which I think is just unbelievably wonderful. He said, Robin and I were friends, not intimate, because he was very shy when he was not performing. It's hard to believe somebody that's so out there, like Robin Williams was, that he could be deemed as shy. Still, I spent many birthdays and holidays at his home with Marcia and the children, and he showed up at my 70th birthday to say hello, and wound up mesmerizing my relatives with a 15-minute set that pulverized the audience. When I heard that he had died, I put my own sorrow aside for a later time. I'm a Zen Buddhist priest, and my vows instruct me to help others. So this little letter is meant in that spirit. Normally, when you're gifted with a huge talent of some kind, it's like having a magnificent bicep. People will say, wow, that's fantastic. And they tell you truthfully that it can change your life, take you to unimaginable realms. And it can, and often does. The Zen perspective is a little different. We might say, well, that's a great bicep, but you don't have to do anything to it. Let's work at bringing the rest of your body up to that level. Robin's gift could be likened to the fastest thoroughbred racehorse on earth. It had an unbeatable endurance, nimbleness, and a huge heart. However, it had never been fully trained. Sometimes Robin would ride it like a kayaker, tearing down white water, skimming on the edge of control. We would marvel at his courage, his daring, and his brilliance. But at other times, the horse went where he wanted, and Robin could only hang on for dear life. Some of us have lives like that, don't we? In the final analysis, what failed Robin was his greatest gift, his imagination. Clutching the horse, he could no longer think of a single thing to do to change his life or to make himself feel better, and he stepped off the edge of the saddle. Had the horse been trained, it might have reminded him that there is always something we can do. We can take a walk until the feeling passes. We can find someone else suffering and help them, taking the attention off our own. Or finally, we can learn to muster our courage and simply sit still with what we are thinking, our insoluble problems, becoming as intimate with them as we can, facing them until we get over our fear. They may even be insoluble, but that does not mean that there is nothing we can do. Our great-hearted friend will be back as the rain, as the cry of a raven, as the wind. He, you, and I have never, for one moment, not been a part of it all. But we would be doing his life and memory a disservice if we did not extract some wisdom from his choice, which, if we ponder deeply enough, will turn out to be his last gift. He would beg us to pay attention if he could. Robin Williams gave as much as he could, and he had no more to give, so he left. In his book, How to Survive the Loss of a Love, Peter McWilliams says that when suicide is the answer, ask a different question. And I remember years ago working with two people who were suicidal. And the first person, my daughter's godmother, Ruth, who did in fact take her own life, I didn't really have any control over. I didn't think that I had any control over. I wanted to have control over, but I didn't. And the second person, who is still alive, was suicidal right after Ruth passed away. And I was so frustrated with this young person that I just finally told her, look, I'm tired of getting these calls from Alta Bates at Herrick Hospital in Berkeley. If you can't handle this by yourself, if you need to take your own life, then I'll just honor that part of you. But I said, before you do that, go and rent this movie, What Dreams May Come, the one that Robin Williams was in. And fairly recently, my young friend, who is now in her 40s, wrote me a letter saying that was the turning point in her life. She's happily married, living on some island off the coast of Seattle, and it made a difference in her world. This movie made a tremendous difference in her world. So these three stories illustrate the chain reaction of what one person can do to change the world. It reaches out to all around, and it sets in motion a reaction to which there is no limit. We know that the power of God that does this is good. It is a power of love, light, peace, truth, beauty, and it is the God that is present everywhere and in all of us. For just as there is an energy caught from the universe, as Ernest Holmes says, there is also a spiritual energy caught in everyone's mind here today and locked up in the individual life that is just sitting there waiting to be used. How should I be giving? Well, if all it takes is happiness, then if we have the power to make someone happy, why don't we do it? I think the world needs more of that. Whether it's one life in a concentration camp, some snakes and ants in a jungle, or a comedian reaching millions of people with his silliness, nano, it is within us to heal, to bless, and to prosper those in our lives, knowing that with God, all things are possible. Will you join me in consciousness, please? And as the Native Americans say, it's a good day to be alive, and it's a good day to die. They're one and the same thing. So as I speak this truth in the first person for all here present today, I know that I do die daily. I die daily to the old idea of who I am, to the new idea of who I am becoming. And I know that the power and presence of Spirit in my life, knowing that there is that one idea that is making itself known by means of me on this plane of consciousness, I recognize in that idea the answer to everything that I need to know about any question I could ever ask. And so from the part of me that longs to express in a greater and more valuable way to my life experience today, I know that I do make a difference, that I am making a difference, and that I will make a difference. That whatever it is that I choose to do in this lifetime has very little to do with the legacy that I leave behind. It's who I am that is the legacy. That the only legacy that I really live to give is my happiness. And so today I know this to be the truth for everyone here. I know that as we share this time and space with one another today, and we grieve the loss of someone so public and so personable and so just darn cute, that we realize that life is tenuous, and that, as Emerson said, do a kindness now, for you may not know how soon it will be too late. And so today, I just simply open up to a greater idea once again of what it is that I can be, and that how I should give in this lifetime. If I am in sadness over anything, then I get to reach out and help somebody else. And that, of course, takes me out of my own stuff and moves me into a place of making a difference. I know today that as I choose to live from a place of joy and celebration, I can do this simply by changing my mind about how it is that I'm feeling. And I move out into my world in a much bigger way. And so I know today for all of us that it's an opportunity for a retrospective, a look at what it is that brought us here today. That everything we've ever been, done, or said got us to where we are at this point in time. And that it is good and very good. Otherwise, we would be somewhere else, doing something else. I know that it is a day of celebration and joy. It is a day of loving generosity. As I release my word to the activity of the law, I know that that law just simply takes it on, embraces it, and allows me to have a changed life experience. Because someone else's life has changed, I get to change too. I know that God is in the mix and that all is well, as we say together, and so it is.